And we're now live, and this is the part where we complain about the weather. And Z, you said there's a bunch of smog. California. I'm sorry. Z says you guys send him smog on a regular basis.
I mean, yeah, nonstop for sure.
Nonstop?
Stop sending it over. Stop sending it over, please.
Yeah. Well, I read this study that said it was from China. That actually LA's smog is coming in. It's being imported from China, which I think is fascinating. I don't know if that's true.
Or is that just a default? Everything's China. I don't know.
Well, that's right. Well, today there's a lot of people that roll that way. All right, we will get started. Everybody that's rolling in, welcome. It's good to see you all here. We'll get started in 1 minute. We're just chatting. All right, and then so Jerry, you're in Boulder.
I'm in Boulder.
Boulder's got it scary with COVID right now. You guys are kind of back on a little bit of a lockdown, masks required, and you only have 10 ICU beds. That's what I heard of 2 days ago.
Abundance of caution. But, Boulder County has 82% of people with at least one shot.
Yeah, something like 70% of people are fully vaccinated. So it's interesting to me that they're still being that's how really kind of scary infectious this is. So that's good. All right. Hey, it is noon. Hi, LinkedIn. I am Mike Black, and this is the Page Black Leadership Series. I should be on screen while I do this intro. Let's go that way. We are here every Thursday, and we bring in panels of experts to talk about various challenges and solutions to those challenges that business leaders in the middle market face. And today, we're going to be talking about how do you lead in today's chaotic business environment. And we kind of alluded to some of the challenges. I want you actually to go back and think just 18 months ago, early March, pre all of this, what's the last thing you did before the lockdown? I know what I did is I had a coffee. I was in downtown Denver. I was meeting with some potential clients. It was spring. The air was clean. It was lovely. And the world was in denial. Everybody said that at that point, we all thought COVID wasn't a thing. It's not going to be serious. I had doctors telling me it's just like the flu. And there was no sense that 2 or 3 days later, the entire world would shut down. I actually knew we were going to do that. My wife she speaks Mandarin. She reads ahead. And so I actually was ahead of the world. We had all the toilet paper we needed throughout the entire toilet paper shortage of 2020. So, but what was your situation like? And think about your business. So for us, it was a challenge. We started off the year to really have a banner year, and we lost literally 60% of our revenue on April 1st of 2020. So it was not a small challenge. We scrambled. We started to look at how do we do things differently. We did a lot of pivoting. I like to think that I have some perspective now on leading in a chaotic business environment, but I'm going to learn today if that's true with my panel. And let me introduce them. So my panel, who I'll bring in a minute. First, we have Jerry Comer. He is the principal and owner of Comer & Associates. He's worked with dozens of management teams over 27 years. He helps CEOs and management teams solve people and execution problems so they achieve goals with harmony and enthusiasm. Then we have Sean Dakin. He's a chief futurist and managing principal of Next Order Impact. Sean's a strategic foresight and innovation leader. He actually was on a previous episode where we were talking about innovation, had lots to say, and that really resonated. I think that'll be a powerful thing today. He helps purpose-driven organizations manage complexity and uncertainty in the context of rapid change. And so I think we're in that world now. We're open, we're not open. The shots are working, they're not working. And so it's chaotic. Then we have Z Tinoco. He's the senior diversity leadership and OD specialist at Insight. Z joined Insight Enterprises in 2014. He's currently a senior diversity and leadership and OD specialist. He's responsible for teammate and leadership development. And I think that's going to give us some insight into this. He also leads 2 highly coveted leadership programs for Insight: Aspiring Leadership and Purpose-Driven Leadership. And so I am excited to have them on. Briefly, my name is Mike Black. I'm the CEO, managing partner / janitor of Page Black, and the least important person on this call. It's great to see you, everybody, today. Let's get rolling with our first question. So I want to start off with what are some of the challenges we're facing and what are the mistakes we're making. And so our first question, I'll just throw it up on the screen so you can see it, is what is one mistake business leaders are making today? And Jerry, why don't you get us started?
Sure. First of all, Mike, thank you for inviting me onto this panel, and I appreciate the opportunity. In preparation, knowing the question, I actually made a few notes here, which I'm going to be referring to. The mistake that I see, at least in the clients that I'm working with, the people that I'm talking to, management teams are simply getting bogged down way too much in day-to-day stuff. And that's not just a COVID issue, certainly, but I'm sure seeing it in spades today. So I'm working with several clients right now, anywhere from 10 million to 100 million plus, different industries, different geographies. But I've got one example that I wanted to just share with you. It's a multi-state distribution company. They've got several new marketing initiatives they're working on that are driving internal operational changes. So a lot of stuff's going on. They've experienced significant growth in the last 2 years despite COVID, but now they're getting really bogged down. They're struggling with growth in the key management team, and that's really the CEO and the direct reports. So a couple of the things that I'm seeing as I've been working with them now for the last year, one, there's not enough of them on the key management team. They've grown to a point where they really needed to expand it. The management skills have not been upgraded. People need to step up in terms of their management role. They just haven't taken the time to get folks operating at a higher level on the key management team. The org structure has not evolved. And finally, their whole process for planning, well, it's kind of non-existent. Mm-hmm. So, the bottom line net result of all this is they got more and more activity for the key managers, just keeping the plate spinning. They've had margin erosion. Too many mistakes, delays in executing. There've been some communication challenges, and overall declining morale, kind of losing their edge. It's not fatal yet, but they're struggling.
So, Jerry, one of the themes that I'm hearing about all the time right now is the Great Resignation. And that just seems to me like that could be really even their management team, if they're overwhelmed and they're kind of caught up in the day-to-day, they're not necessarily operating where they should be or leading from where they should be. It seems like that could be a significant challenge. What are you seeing there?
Well, in this one particular example, I'm not seeing that. They haven't had turnover at the key management team level. They have had trouble acquiring some new managers. I mean, they have actually thought about bringing people on. But they're not seeing the Great Resignation play out for their company. In fact, the three companies that I'm working with at the moment, that has not been an issue, the Great Resignation, not at the key management, CEO, key managers level. It just hasn't been an issue that I've seen.
All right. Yeah, one of the companies we're working with, they lost their key operations person, moved on to a career with more, it actually is less prestigious and more purpose-driven, which is interesting to watch that happen. So I hope that continues for your clients. Z, what are you seeing around the mistakes that your clients are seeing?
Yeah, that was a good question that you asked, Mike, because there's a lot of things that came to my mind. But I mean, I'm going to be a little biased here. I'm in leadership and teammate development, but it really is investing in your leadership, and by that I mean is really taking the time to give them the tools, the resources, the education they need to work through what we call, and we use this term a lot because it's used in the military and the army as work through VUCA. And as we know, COVID is going to be a case study for VUCA, as a lot of different milestones and major events in our lives are, and they're going to come. But we have to trust our teammates and our leaders to know, hey, how am I going to maneuver this crazy world? And it's COVID now, but it could be something else in the future. And you know what? I feel like this is kind of I love sports a lot, so sports analogy, this is all the practice that we had of little minor VUCA situations, but now we have the big game, and how are we going to overcome this and get to the finish line and survive this together?
All right, so tell me, for those of us that don't run in military circles, which is me, what's VUCA? How does that? I've heard of the OOPA loop, but I have not heard of VUCA.
VUCA, it's an acronym, of course, because everything's an acronym. It stands for volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. Which as soon as you hear those, you're like, yes, I deal with that, and the daily, yeah. And the key is we can't eliminate it. We can do our best to minimize it, right? We can have the best plans, and I always like the quote from Mike Tyson. You may have a plan until you get punched in the face. So that's really what happens. You can plan the best that you can, but once you get punched in the face, everything goes off the window, right? But developing your team and knowing, hey, follow the process. You know our goal. You know our mission. I trust you that you're going to make the right decisions. And guess what? You're not alone, right? You have your team. You have your leadership to lean on to guide you along the way. And that's really what the goal is. And I feel a lot of leaders are missing the mark, is that either first they didn't train their teammates and their leaders on how to overcome VUCA. Second of all is trusting them that they can do this because you follow the process. You taught them the way.
All right. So now my next question is: have you heard? I said OOPA and that's wrong. OODA loop, which that's going to be a fun. I'm gonna have to cut that out. That's a blooper.
I was thinking like cool. Willy Wonka. I was like, what?
That's what I was thinking.
Oompa Loompas.
No, that's right. So the OODA loop is a fighter pilot thing that came out of, I think, the Vietnam War, where we started losing. They looked at how do you observe, orient, decide, act, and then cycle back to observe. And so the reason I bring it up is it actually does coincide well with what you're talking about in the VUCA. So anyways, new thought on that. You don't have to comment because that's not any part of the preparation, and I don't know any more than I've just said. I bet Sean Dakin does, though, no?
I was hoping to disagree with Jerry and Z, and I'm disappointed that I can't. I've actually heard similar things from clients that I've worked with over the last 6 months. Leadership development is a big deal right now. However, there is an update on VUCA, which is Bonnie, if you haven't heard of it, Z. It's brittle, anxious, nonlinear, and incomprehensible. I didn't make that up. Somebody else did. Someone much smarter than I am. And so, I think just kind of taking it in a little bit of a different direction, though, in terms of mistakes that leaders are making now, I think, being insensitive to the needs of their most precious asset, which is their people, and sort of categorically imposing a policy, for example, return to the office. We hear a lot about organizations that are embracing a remote or hybrid experience for employees. But just this morning, I read that Goldman Sachs wants everybody back in the office as soon as possible, and that seems to me counterproductive for them. So I think it's the core values of leadership in a time of crisis, and I would argue that we're no longer in a time of crisis. We're not truly in a chaotic domain. It's complicated and certainly complex. But true crisis management is really not about creating an answer, but creating a structure where the answer can emerge. I think the principles of leadership in that environment and the environment we're in now are all the same, right? It's focusing on your mission, taking care of your people, open communication, being optimistic. I think those are principles that will carry us forward.
Sean.
Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say that not to beat my particular horse to death, but the idea of the mistakes that management are making, it's not actually related to crisis at all, as I'm seeing it, or COVID. I mean, all the three companies I'm working with right now, they all grew dramatically during COVID. I don't doubt for a minute that COVID created some more stress. But even without COVID, the tendency for management to get bogged down in day-to-day is not new. And certainly when you've got any kind of a rapid growth situation, all the tendencies to firefight just get worse and worse.
So, Jerry, I have a question. Did they grow despite COVID or because of COVID?
Despite COVID.
Okay. Some companies are growing because of, right? Like Zoom is an example of a company that's grown exponentially because of COVID. So I was just curious. Sean, you were going to say something.
Yeah, I was going to say the getting bogged down piece is really indicative of not separating the urgent from the important.
Right.
And certainly that happens in times of complexity and crisis, but absolutely happens outside of those times, depending on the organization.
Right. Well, and Jerry, you nailed what I think causes that is they get into fight or flight mode and they immediately, that pulls out, they lose the perspective of what's urgent and important and start just nailing what's urgent, and it may not be important. And that would be getting into the day-to-day for sure.
Another thought also related to Sean's comments about the insensitivity, I think was the phrase you used, Goldman Sachs. You're coming back to the office whether you like it or not. Another aspect of the just getting by, I've seen insensitivity too, but it's not so much conscious thing as, hey, I'm working with a CEO right now, and he's just so crazy busy, he's kind of ignoring his people. And as a result, he is simply not sensitive. He cannot be sensitive to what's going on in their world as much as he could or should be.
Let me add to that, Jerry. That really struck a nerve for me because, I hear that a lot, from our leaders. And the first thing I say, if you don't have time for your people, you really need to invest in your people because they're basically running around not knowing where to go. There's no direction. You brought up earlier that there's probably a lot of redundancy, a lot of urgent matters happening, but it's not important. They're doing a lot of busy work. And what we're seeing in the pattern as well is once everybody went remote, a lot of our teammates and even our leaders don't know how to manage their time, and they don't. They had a rhythm in their life of, hey, I wake up, I have a cup of coffee, brush my teeth, whatever that routine is, drive to work, maybe think about my day, plan it. So they had a rhythm, and we just COVID threw that out the door for everybody. And there's people still that haven't found that new rhythm. Like, what is my daily routine? When do I clock in? When do I clock out? When's my build up time? When's my calming down or ending my day routine. And that's where I tell leaders all the time, by you saying that, they are dying for your attention and you need to make time. And it's really, it comes down to, managing your time better is saying no. We want to be the superheroes. A lot of time leaders, and that's what we're conditioned, is to save the day, be the problem solver, put out fires, but it's not warranted all the time. Delegate that, give it to others, listen, ask questions, be curious. And then, discern that and filter that out. But it's hard because leaders want to fix problems. And we've been conditioned that if that was our routine before.
Well, that's how you became a leader. Sean, what were you going to say? We got to move forward in just a second. Sean and Jerry, you both had a comment. Sean, go first, then Jerry.
Yeah, really quick. I think there are a certain type of leader that thrives on that type of environment, right? That thrives on the chaos. And I don't think that's a good thing, right? I think that is indicative. I was actually having this conversation with a close friend yesterday. I think that's indicative of a fear of accountability, right? You don't have to make the hard decisions when you're being pulled in a lot of different directions, and when you're running with your head chopped off. And I think it's also indicative of probably insecurity on the leader's part. So I would argue that telling that leader to spend more time with their people may be counterproductive. Maybe you need to swap the leader.
Maybe they need to spend more time with themselves. Or certainly, as good friends of mine know, I have left the hustle lifestyle behind, and I am not going to. I don't kind of live on that adrenaline focus thing anymore.
Wow.
And so that's a piece of that as well. Jerry, you had a quick comment, and then I'm going to move us forward.
Yeah, a quick comment on the leadership thing. So I always differentiate between manager and leader. Manager is all about performance and accountability, and we got to achieve the mission. Leadership is much more about tuning in everything that's going on, creating a vision, creating followers and whatnot. And I think one of the things that's happened in this period when people are super busy is sort of the leadership tends, if you were a leader to start with, and not everybody is, the leadership kind of gets depressed and we just fall into the management trap. We got to get stuff done, period.
Mm-hmm.
Right. That absolutely makes sense. All right. I'm going to move this forward. This date is wrong. We hosted this week and had 250 people sign up for our webinar on how to survive the Great Resignation and come out stronger. Jerry's clients will not be signing up because that's not their problem, which fair enough, good for them. But that said, we are going to do this again. The date here will change to October 19th of 2021. And April shared that link in our chat. So have a look at that. If you think that'd be helpful, please join us. We had a really good session. I want to talk briefly about navigating the marketplace, or navigating the marketing landscape, excuse me. And so as business leaders, you feed and clothe. I should be on screen for this part. Excuse me. As business leaders, you employ and you feed and clothe the world. And every day when you sit down to your desk, you have to make critical decisions, which we're talking about a little bit of that today, that change the future of your company. And some of those are marketing decisions. And so those decisions will decide, do you grow, do you shrink, or maybe even do you go away? And often, because you're so busy, you and the nature of this chaotic world we live in, or the chaotic world you create, as we've just talked about, you make these decisions on limited data. And I'm here to say it doesn't have to be that way. And so we talk a lot at Bates Black about data-driven marketing decisions. And what that means from our perspective is that and it's not, actually, let me say that I say that you are likely thinking of Tableau dashboards, and that is not at all what I mean. What I mean is, what's the data you need to make effective marketing decisions? And I will start with, if your CRM is functional, and some are and some aren't, and it's actually done right, your CRM has a lot of data that will tell you who is your best customer. I would encourage you to add, so you're going to be looking at things like profitability, time to close. I would encourage you to add something around some psychographics that make them easy to work with, that you look forward to meetings with them, especially in the B2B space, but even in the product space, you want to look at who returns products less. Once you have that, now go talk to those people and find out what's important to them, what's their buying process, why would they pick you, what would make them go away, good data to have. And then you compare all of that and map it against what your competition is saying and doing. And in there's going to be a gap. You take that gap, and that's where you position your marketing. And if you're really good at it in today's marketplace, you're actually going to add a narrative that tells the story of how they can solve those problems. All right, I'm going to move forward next into our next question. I'll pop this out again. We always want to come out with some actionable advice. We want to walk away with some baby step that we can move forward with. And so my question to the panel now is, what is one small step that business leaders can take today, maybe tomorrow or over the weekend, to get started? And I will lead off with Sean Dakin.
Yeah, so good question. I think it's about emergent practice, right? It's about taking the opportunity to experiment. This is not often that something like this comes along in the world, and nobody really knows all the right answers. So I think it behooves us to run safe to fail experiments, and that could be experiments on from digital transformation to hiring practices, to retention practices, to supply chain, to anything, right? And it's also a good time to reevaluate your organizational behavior, your values, your leadership, kind of tying it back to the Great Resignation. So I think that's the prescription that I would have.
All right, so safe to fail.
Mm-hmm.
Love that, because I think people often jump into experiments like that. They're all in, and the entire company rides it, and then it's a problem. If it falls apart, that's bad. Mm-hmm. How do people define safe to fail?
Well, yeah, it actually goes back to the conversation we had in the last panel that I was in around innovation, which is you develop either contrived experiments or natural experiments that have conditions around them such that the increment of progress is not whether it succeeds or fails, but whether or not you've learned from it, and whether or not you're closer to that the thing that you're trying to achieve in the world. And so that starts again from an innovation perspective. It's a cultural change. Because a lot of organizations will do experiments, and failure is perceived as a bad thing. And so that's why you have to size and scope those experiments appropriately. Because if you make a wholesale change to something that's very important without fully understanding the consequences of that change, it may not be the right direction.
Absolutely. All right. So Sean says the answer is experimenting. What do you say?
Well, let me echo what he just said about experimenting. I've heard a lot of great stories during this pandemic of organizations that have actually taken this opportunity to step back and realize, hey, now we have more time to innovate. We were just kind of filling orders or what have you. Let's take a step back and recess our business. What can we do? One of them that comes to mind, if I'm going to butcher the organization, but I think it's called like Gig Carnival or some Give Carnival. They're basically an indoor, digital carnival And they took this opportunity to say, hey, we're closed. We don't have clients, but we can sit here and complain, or we can sit here and innovate. What are some things that are lagging? What are some things? And they created a virtual stadium where they have, individuals there, in a physical live stadium, but also people online and participating in events. So that's what when I saw that, I'm like, that's exactly what businesses need. Let's figure out what we can do with what's going on. But to your question, this was hard. And for me, it really comes down to just go back to your motive. A lot of people say, go back to your why. Why did I go into leadership? Why did I go into business in the first place? Reassess that and say, hey, did I go into it for the fame and the glory and the money? No, hopefully not, right? Hopefully it's because you want to make a difference, because you have a true passion. You're something that inspires you, that motivates you, that drives you. And once you check that, the next step is really invest in yourself, because your team, your organization is going to be no good if you're not fresh. You're not taking care of yourself, and whether that's mind, body, soul, spirit. I mean, just your whole person. Invest in yourself. Take that time, and you're going to give your best to your organization and your team and your clients.
So I'm hearing a bit of the airplane mask. Put the oxygen mask on first before you take care of other people. Take care of yourself.
Yeah.
And I like that one. Thank you. Very good. All right, Jay, what do you say?
Yeah, I'm going to take a phrase from Z, step back and apply it to the problem that I see is everybody getting bogged down. There are 5 key functions of management: planning, leading, organizing, controlling, and communicating. Managers are too bogged down in the day-to-day. CEO plus management team takes some time every month, even if it's a morning break, to ask yourself, how are we doing on the 5 key functions of management? If you're not doing what you should, put an action plan in place to figure out how to do it.
All right. That was easy. I didn't even get you off full screen quickly enough. I'm sorry about that. But that sounds like the OODA loop with some filters. So I like it. All right. Very good. That is our panel for today. I'm briefly going to go over. Next week, we are talking about, do I hybrid or not? And I suspect this will be my suspicion is, but we'll find out. My suspicion is the answer is yes, we should hybrid. We should have people working from home as well as in the office. And how do we do that effectively? All right, folks, thank you very much for your time, and we will see you next week.